Rees Rambles, episode 31. And good morning, Americans. And, well, of course, everyone else. But specifically the Americans among my listeners, because in this episode, and indeed the next episode, I'm going to be reviewing your country. Yes, that's right. I spent 2 weeks in America, and I've seen a very, very, very tiny area of your country, and I'm going to basically assume that the rest of it is exactly the same, because why wouldn't I? And I'm going to give some thoughts and some feedback on our epic trip, which started up in Napa Valley, just north of San Francisco. So this is all West Coast stuff. And then we went down into San Francisco for a couple of days, flew down to LAX, to LA, and spent quite a bit of time in LA itself, on the outskirts, and then going into the center, and then finally into Las Vegas. So very typical tourist trip for a British person wanting to check out the West Coast. A couple of quite iconic and important things that we did miss, like the Hoover Dam and the Grand Canyon and stuff like that, which I have seen on previous trips. My wife Catherine, who was with me for this holiday, of course, hasn't seen them, but unfortunately we had such a hectic schedule that we just couldn't fit them in this time. But we will be back. We have decided that we will be going back, so that obviously bodes well for this review, I guess. And of course, this is going to be a bit of a light-hearted bit of fun, and also a good way for me to kind of recap my fantastic couple of weeks away, and also maybe give people some inspiration if you're planning your own trips and wanting to check out that amazing part of the world. But first up, just a little bit of a preamble to this ramble. One thing that I have noticed recently is that my listener numbers are starting to decline a little bit. They've always been there's always been that kind of core listener base who've always been with me, and they've always been a little bit inconsistent. But I've noticed just recently that the numbers are looking a little bit lower, and I'm trying to work out why that is. I think I have this theory that when I first started this, it was all kind of my opinions and my thoughts on things, and some kind of background information about stuff that was going on with the channel, and kind of my thought process that went into some of my videos and stuff. And I think recently, in recent weeks, I've kind of started to pivot away from that a little bit and talk about actual news, retro news, and that kind of stuff. And yeah, there are a million and one other places on the internet where you can get that, and of course, with this being kind of in a podcast format, I record it on a certain day, and then it goes out days later, and by that point, other stuff has happened, and perhaps it's not the best way to kind of catch up with that news, and perhaps there are other people out there who are doing a much better job of that. So I think I'm gonna focus a bit more on going back to sort of back to my roots a bit with the Rees Rambles, and hence the reason for this particular choice of topic. So I hope you enjoy it, and I think without further ado, let's get on and start with the review. So we started off by heading down to Heathrow, as many trips to America often do, and our flight was in the morning, so we went down the night before and stayed in the Radisson, which was a very nice hotel, and got to the airport nice and early, and spent some nice time hanging around in the lounge. My wife Catherine decided that she wanted to use Uber for the very first time to get us from the Radisson to Heathrow, which was like a 5-minute car journey. And this is going to be a bit of a recurring theme in this ramble as well, because we used Uber quite a lot in America. We did rent a car very, very briefly to go from one place to another, which I will talk about. That'll be in the next episode. But otherwise, I don't really like renting cars on holiday. I like to have the freedom to, I'm on holiday. I don't want to come across as like a raging alcoholic or anything, but, it's quite nice to have a drink with lunch, which is something that I don't do at home. And I don't drink and drive at all. And I think it's a bit more socially acceptable in America, but I just won't do it. I try to avoid driving if I can. But obviously, of course, America is a country that's very much built around the car and around driving. And so Uber seemed like a good compromise. And actually, when you go back and you add it all up, and you kind of compare the cost of those odd trips sort of here and there to renting a car for the day and paying to park it and everything else, actually it's it can be quite an economical way of doing things. And particularly compared to like some of the local taxis that we looked at. I mean, like for example, when we landed in San Francisco, we looked at getting a taxi up to Napa Valley, which was our first destination, and the actual taxis at the airport were like $300 plus for like this 2 hour journey up to Napa, and it was like just over 100 with Uber, which is about what it would have cost us to rent a car. But of course, when we looked into it, it was basically, we would have rented a car, driven it up there, parked it at the hotel, and then not driven it for a couple of days, and then driven it back to San Francisco and kind of given it back. And it actually worked out cheaper just to get Ubers in both directions, which was quite interesting. Perhaps something that people don't tend to sort of consider. But yes, like I mentioned, we went up to Napa. Now, if you haven't heard of Napa, it's a wine growing region, and I'm sure if you know anything about me, you'll know that I'm quite keen on the wine. That's the second reference to being a raging alcoholic within the first few minutes of the podcast. We went up to Napa, and I must admit, I didn't really know much about American wine, and I didn't really rate it, to be honest. My knowledge of American wine, but basically kind of extended to Barefoot White Zinfandel, and which is, I mean, fair play to you if that's your particular tipple of choice, but it's certainly my mum's favourite, but not one that I'm not personally very keen on. But that was pretty much it. It was like, it was kind of mass-produced, not very interesting stuff, really. But I was quite keen to check it out and to kind of learn, because we went to the Champagne region in France, and we've been to the Prosecco region in Italy. Done both of those, and we've done wine tastings and been to wineries. Earlier in the year, we went to Croatia. We went to another winery there as well, and it's just interesting to check it out and see kind of the differences in different parts of the world. And there are a few different valleys in this area in kind of Northern California. I think Napa is the best known. There's also Sonoma next to Napa, but there's a couple of others as well. I don't have the list up in front of me. And we decided to do the wine train. Now, the wine train is it was a railway that was built to service the wineries in Napa Valley way back when it was kind of first established, and of course, it being America and the way that things are, the roads have taken over, and road transport, and obviously you see the trucks. It's kind of just coming up to harvest season as well, so you see the big trucks with all the big crates full of stuff preparing for the harvest season, heading up and down the kind of main road down the valley. And I refer to it as a valley, and technically it is, but it's quite flat. It's quite a huge, flat, open area, kind of between some kind of low mountain ranges. And the train kind of fell out of use for commercial use, and a private company bought it up and turned it into a tourist attraction. So you can get on these really lovely old restored 1950s carriages, and the kind of food carriages. So the setup is that you kind of sat around tables, and they serve you with fancy food and stuff while you travel up and down the valley. And it was really good. I wasn't really sure what to expect. We did watch a couple of videos about it. But I think the nature of it and the aspect of it is something that's quite hard to get across in video. I must admit, I was quite tempted to try and do one myself, but it was a bit, it's kind of a bit off topic for me, I guess. And then I will talk about a couple of videos that I made while I was over there a little bit later on. But so basically you get on the train, and it heads up to the other end of the valley. There's a big wooden "Welcome to Napa" sign, which you stop next to, which was quite amusing, because the sign is a bit of a tourist attraction in and of itself, as you might expect, and it's between the railway is between the sign and the road. So you get a lot of people who have tourist maps and stuff that say, "Oh, visit the sign, take a picture of yourself next to the sign," and they come up to where it's supposed to be and pull up at the side of the road, and there's this huge great train in the way, so they can't actually take their photo with it, which is quite funny, because we stopped by the sign for quite a while. And that was actually the location of the first tasting that we did. So the Napa Valley Wine Train partner with local wineries, and they make their own branded wine. And you'd think, oh, it's like a promotional tourist wine. You don't go in expecting great things, but I must admit that we had a Chardonnay. I'm not going to review every single wine that we tasted because there were 11 in total, plus like 2 glasses of bubbles that we bought on the train as well. So that's quite a lot to get through, and I'm not really qualified to talk about wine and review it, and I'm sure you're not really interested in that. But yeah, the first one we had first stop we had a Chardonnay, we had a Merlot or a Merlot as they call them in America, and another one that was like a blended Cabernet Sauvignon type thing. And yeah, they were excellent. I'm not a big Chardonnay drinker, but Catherine's really into her kind of oaky, buttery sort of Chardonnays, and that's very much what it was. And it was quite interesting. I find that Chardonnay can be quite sort of thin and tasteless and quite boring a lot of the time. But very glad to report that wasn't the case with this one. And yeah, the train continued on its journey. Obviously, a few glasses of wine in us, and I have to give a shout out to the sommelier, to the wine guy / host on the train, a guy called Jorge, and he was from Puerto Rico, and a real sort of larger than life character, dressed very smartly in his suit. But on that first stop, he said that by the end of the day, we'd all be friends and we'd all be dancing and stuff. And of course, as being British and being very reserved, we're quite doubtful about that, particularly as we were the only Brits on the train. It was kind of predominantly American couples. There was a couple from Korea, and some people from Canada, and kind of a couple of other places. But yeah, we were the only Brits, and of course he went round the group and asked everyone where they were from, which of course is an absolute nightmare when you're introverted and British and reserved and all that kind of stuff. But actually, yeah, by the end of the day, we were all kind of drunk and dancing around in this big open air carriage. But as promised, because he was a very good host and very very welcoming and kind of. Involved us in the frivolities of the day. So basically, you stop at 2 wineries on the particular tour that we were on. One of them is all the way down the other end of the valley, so it's a place called Krug. Now, you may have heard of Krug. They're a big champagne house in France. But and I always thought that the American one was like an offshoot of the original French one, and that they were connected somehow, run by the same company. But turns out that no, that there were actually 2 different winemakers back in the day with the surname of Krug. One of them who happened to set up in France, and one of them who happened to set up in Napa Valley in California, and they weren't related and they're not connected whatsoever. And the one in California, based on the 3 wines that we tasted there, and I can't even remember exactly what they were, but based on the ones that we tasted there, it is not as good at making wine as the French one. But I mean, it was all right. But it was kind of nothing to write home about. But we did meet a very nice couple from San Diego at that tasting, and got talking to them. So that was pretty cool. Not like us to sort of socialise and talk to people, but there you go. And then we went down to the second winery of the day, which was called V Satui. And I've just been looking at the website, and I still can't work out what the V stands for. I guess it's the first initial of whoever founded that winery. And our kind of main impression of that place was it was quite funny initially, because we pulled up there on the train, and as we were pulling up, they basically said, right, you're going to have to be quick because they don't like us parking the train in front of the winery. Which is fair enough. Obviously, they don't want to block the view from the road and discourage people from stopping there. So we all had to get off very quickly, and then they kind of shuffled the train off down the road a bit, and they said that we had to be back at a very specific time because obviously they had to manoeuvre the train back for us all to get back on it, and then we had to leave quite quickly afterwards. And so that kind of raised a bit of an eyebrow, I guess. And then we got off the train, and our host was there, the guy kind of conducting the tour. And immediately, his initial comment as we got off the train was basically, don't touch the grapes unless you're an Amex Platinum card holder or Black card holder, because they're worth $1,000 a bunch and you can't afford them. And the way that he phrased it was just like, I think he was trying to be funny. While also telling us not to touch the grapes. I guess they have a big problem with tour groups and stuff, kind of picking them and eating them, particularly at that time of year when they're kind of fully ripe. But But yeah, that was kind of the initial impression that he gave us. And as we were walking towards the winery, he also said, "Oh, we've got a wedding on today, and we're all set up for that in the cellar. So don't touch any of the wedding stuff." And it was like, well, obviously we're not going to go interfering with with people's wedding stuff and with the grapes and stuff. So perhaps they've had problems with that kind of thing in the past. I don't know, but. As we were walking towards the cellar, a woman did kind of turn to me and say, "Oh, what a what a dick, basically. I'm going to touch as much stuff as possible now." And I said, "Oh yeah, we should lick it." And she thought that was the funniest thing she'd ever heard. So. Of course, this was after a few glasses of wine, but I'm very pleased to say that V Satui, excellent. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but really excellent winery. They do weddings there, like I mentioned, and really lovely old kind of Italian style, stone building. And I think the original plans was that we were going to taste like 3, but then we ended up tasting like 6 because Jorge was getting quite whipped up into a bit of a frenzy at this point and started helping himself to stuff and dishing it out to people. And actually, it ended up being really cool. They've got a huge shop there, and apparently they don't sell their wines to restaurants or, they don't export them at all. If you want to buy those wines, you have to actually go to that specific winery and go to their shop and buy them. So that was quite a special experience. And they were telling us that they'd had like Silicon Valley millionaires and people coming down trying to buy job lots of their wine and stuff, and they were like, "No, we're going to limit you to 6 bottles at a time," and stuff like that. And again, I don't know if they had a bit of a chip on their shoulder and were trying to make it out to be a bit more special and a bit more exciting than it really was. But they're also known for their Madeira. Apparently, they make a really excellent Madeira. And to be fair, we did taste it, and not usually my kind of thing, but. It was nice. It was good. And apparently Madeira isn't one of those kind of protected AOC type things where you can only make it in one specific region, like Champagne or Prosecco or whatever, which I didn't know. I didn't realise that they made Madeira in America. Seems a bit wrong to me. You'd think they'd call it something else, but there you go. But anyway, that's the wine train. Like I said, like I kind of alluded to a bit earlier, we headed back towards Napa, towards the actual town of Napa itself on the train. And Jorge put on a big party for us, a big open air carriage where we'd done like the tastings and stuff. Put his 80s banger playlist on, and of course we'd all had 11 plus glasses of wine, and it was fun. It was a lot of fun. I'm not usually one for dancing around with strangers and that kind of stuff, but people were very friendly, and it was nice. It was kind of nice to be a part of it, and waving out of the windows at the traffic, and we had people waving at us and honking at us, and obviously the train crosses quite a lot of roads, and they had to the barriers came down, and there were quite a lot of cars that were kind of stopped waiting for us to come through. Very short train, only the engine and like the 3 carriages, but. People were filming us on their phones and waving at us and honking at us. So it was all in good fun. And I have to say, we kind of discussed it, over the course of the 2 weeks and in the time since we got back. And I think that whole trip was kind of the highlight of the holiday for us. The very first thing that we did, and I can honestly highly recommend it if you do like wine at all, or if you're interested in sort of trying it and getting into it. And the actual town of Napa itself is really, really lovely. It's really kind of historic, and it's really nice. It would have been nice to have spent a bit more time there. It's quite expensive to stay in the centre of Napa itself. So we kind of stayed on the outskirts and walked in. Very walkable as well, which was nice. We had a nice morning walk down this kind of jogging/dog walking trail to get to the train initially. And as an activity, I can highly recommend it, and that's why I've spent quite a bit of time talking about it. But next, we will head back down into San Francisco itself. So when I told people that we were going to San Francisco specifically, quite a few people tried to warn us off it, which was quite surprising. And I work in the tech industry and in the software development industry, so I'm well aware of sort of Silicon Valley and all the kind of stuff that goes on around there. And I do keep up to speed with the news and stuff. And yeah, as a city, it has a bit of a reputation in modern times for having like a huge homelessness problem, problems with drugs and that kind of thing. And so we tried not to spend too much time there. We were only there for like 2 days. Basically, just to kind of, I should probably mention that we basically did a very similar holiday when I was a kid, sort of 25 plus years ago when I was a young teenager. And one of the things that I kind of always talked about was that we tried to go to Alcatraz, but the trouble is it always gets booked up really, really quickly. It's booked up like weeks in advance. And we didn't know this when we went there, back in the 90s. And we showed up at Fisherman's Wharf at Pier 39 or wherever it is, and tried to buy tickets, and they were like, "Well, no, it's fully sold out for like the next week or so." And that was it. So we just kind of had to look at Alcatraz from a distance. Alcatraz, of course, being the famous, very high security prison in the San Francisco Bay. So. Yeah, we actually booked. We wanted to do there's like a secret behind the scenes tour that you can do, but even that we booked it like 2 weeks before we went, and even that was completely sold out. So we did the night tour, which is really, really cool. You get on a boat and you get like 3 hours there or something, and it's this really huge place. I wasn't really sure what to expect of Alcatraz. I guess didn't really expect there to be a lot of stuff there, but actually it's massive, and it's a really interesting. There's a lot of really interesting history, and of course you can walk around the actual prison itself and around the grounds and around the island. There is an audio tour, which of course we did, but you're also kind of free to spend your time wandering around the island and looking at the nice views of San Francisco and reading all the information and stuff that they have there. There's a bit of a couple of little museums about specific aspects of it and stuff like that. And it was really, really interesting. So I'm glad that we finally got the chance to do it. And it was kind of the reason why we went to San Francisco, because obviously I'd missed out on that as a kid. And it was like, well, we're going up to Napa anyway. We're going to be heading through San Francisco. So let's spend some time there and kind of do the typical tourist stuff, go on the cable cars and check out Fisherman's Wharf and, all of that kind of stuff. But, like I said, people have kind of warned us off. Obviously, there's spice and there's fentanyl and, these kind of big drug problems. And they told us, all the information that you look at and all the people that you talk to before you go say that you have to avoid this particular area called the Tenderloin, which is like a few blocks kind of in the middle of the city, quite close to Union Square. And it turns out that was actually very close to where we were staying. It was like 2 blocks over, which we knew when we booked it, but we were kind of reassured by some of the information that we'd read that it wasn't going to be a problem, and we were generally heading in the opposite direction to that for all the stuff that we wanted to do. And as it happened, I think on the way out when we left, we kind of went through that area and you could see the tents at the side of the road and, people hanging around and stuff. But apart from that, it's like, you do the tourist stuff and people aren't there bothering you, asking you for money or, acting weird and drugged up and stuff. We saw a couple of people like that later on in Hollywood, which I will talk about next time. It was, it actually didn't prove to be a problem at all. I try to stay away from politics and social commentary and stuff generally, but a city like San Francisco, with all the money that they have there, with all the tech industry and stuff, you'd think they'd sort it out and kind of look after their homeless people and rehabilitate the people with the drug problems properly. But perhaps that's not my place to say. But if you've been to any big city anywhere in the world, London or Paris or anywhere like that. It's not really all that different as far as people on the streets and stuff like that. So I wouldn't let that put you off if you are interested in checking anything out that goes on in San Francisco. So we stayed at a really nice hotel called the Donatello, which was quite amusing. Obviously, one of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Really lovely hotel. Someone had done this huge mural of Greta Thunberg. The child climate campaigner from Sweden or wherever she's from. That was directly opposite our window. We were on like the 11th floor or whatever. So every time I opened the curtains in the morning, she was there staring back at us. She was like a whole story tall, and I'm not sure if she was trying to make me feel guilty for the 11-hour flight that we'd taken to get there or what. But it was a bit bizarre. But some really cool street art and murals and that kind of stuff around the area as well, which is well worth looking at. Went into Chinatown as you do, and there's the bakery there, I guess you'd call it, which claims to be the place where fortune cookies were invented. Obviously, yeah, if you've ever had Chinese food, you would have had fortune cookies. And so we went there and we bought some, did the typical tourist thing, took photos and all that kind of stuff. Interesting place, worth checking out. And it actually wasn't busy at all. I was kind of expecting, queues of people waiting to get in there. But, just walked straight in and, a couple of other people milling about. But that was basically it. Had some nice dim sum and stuff at a place around the corner. So, Chinatown, really cool. And we went on the cable car as well. Of course, San Francisco, famously very, very hilly city, and way back in the day, they built a cable car system. I probably should have researched this so I can talk about the history in a bit more detail because it's very interesting. But anyway, this system's like 100 years old, and it uses cables that run under the streets, which were kind of originally steam driven. I think obviously it's all electric nowadays. But yeah, there's this system of cables that run underneath the streets, and there's a slot in the road itself, and they have these really, really lovely kind of antique cable cars. And basically, there's a driver, and his job is to pull a handle which clamps a clamp that goes through the street and onto the cable. Basically, clamps onto the cable, and that pulls the cable car along. And the way that they stop is obviously pull the handle back and it lets go of the cable. And they also have like wooden brakes as well, which press down against the road. I think Tom Scott did a video about this actually. If you're interested, I'll see if I can find it, or if I can find something interesting. And of course I'll link that in the usual places. But they have these blocks of wood underneath them, and there's the main driver of the cable car, and there's also a guy at the back whose job it is to operate the brakes. And apparently, we actually didn't experience this, which is a bit sad. But apparently, if they have to brake really hard, the brakes basically kind of set on fire, and you can actually smell burning wood from under the cable car. And they have to replace these brakes every 2 to 4 days. Which is really cool because one of the stops on the cable car that we went on was the actual cable car museum, which we decided to check out. And I can really, really recommend that because it's really fascinating. You can actually go underground and see the cables. The place that they built the museum is basically the place where where they originally powered the cables, and they've still got the big motors there and stuff, kind of powering stuff and pulling stuff along. And it's the junction of all of the different sort of cable car routes in San Francisco. And you can actually go down and see all of the cables under the streets, and, the complicated kind of contraption that powers this whole thing. Really, really interesting. And, really glad that we got to check it out. And we did ride on the outside of the cable car as well, very briefly. They have seats inside them, but famously, you can stand on the outside and hang on to a handle, and we made the mistake of picking the side that was kind of in the middle of the road and in the middle of all the traffic and stuff. And yeah, you are, you're doing like 10 miles an hour, and you are literally inches away from the traffic, which is very interesting when all you've got is just a handle to cling on to. But really cool experience, one that I can highly recommend. And yeah, San Francisco, it was cool. It was a very cool place. And after that, we headed down to LA. So we could have driven down the coast, and of course it's a really lovely drive down there. I think it takes a day or maybe less than a day. But in the end, we decided to fly from SFO to LAX, San Francisco International Airport to LA, and we flew with an airline called JetBlue, which are obviously one of the big kind of domestic carriers in the US, and. I have to say, flying with them, I don't know if this is a typical experience of flying domestically in America, but my God, was it good? Compared to some of our shitty budget airlines that we have here in Europe and in the UK, it's like, we got on this plane and it was like an Airbus A320 or Yeah, I think it was an A320. So, basic plane, but you've got full on like proper entertainment system in the back of the seats like you would have on a long haul flight. And they've got live TV on there, and it's got Wi-Fi, and it's like, compare it to like EasyJet or Ryanair or something. It's like, oh my God. And I started off watching Saved by the Bell, as you do, which was live on one of the TV channels that I had on there. And then I thought I'd check out the movies and discovered that they had that 90s teen romance comedy classic, 10 Things I Hate About You, which is one of my favourite films of all time. I know it's a bit sad, but there you go. So I decided to watch that, even though it was the flight was actually supposed to be an hour and a half, but it ended up being just under an hour, which was even better. And in addition to all of that, we also got free food and drink on the flight, on this like less than 1 hour flight. It's quite funny to hear the announcement when the pilot comes on and he says, "Oh, we've just reached our cruising altitude of 33,000 feet or whatever it is. In 10 minutes, we'll be beginning our descent into LAX." And it's like, wow, less than an hour flight, but really, really cool experience. An experience, I have to say, at the airport as well, at San Francisco International. You go to any British airport or any European airport, and they desperately try to funnel you through the duty-free shops, and they want to maximise the amount of profit that they can make out of every passenger. We got to San Francisco, and the airport's just massive and open and airy and modern, and there was none of that. We went through security, which took all of a few minutes. I was an idiot and didn't unpack half of the stuff in my bag that I was supposed to, so I ended up going through the additional screening thing. But even that was a nice experience. They've got like water bottle refill stations everywhere, and one of the first things we came to wandering through the airport was a free exhibition all about the history of the San Francisco Opera. And they had like some of the old like costumes and stuff. So while we were waiting for the flight, we checked out that exhibition as well. Not particularly opera fans, but just a really interesting thing to look at and a really nice atmosphere. And it's just such a different experience to kind of what I'm used to. So definitely. Obviously, I kind of said at the top of this episode that this was going to be a review, and that was definitely one of the more positive aspects of our 2-week holiday. Just the experience of that flight, and something I can definitely recommend to anyone wanting to make that journey. But we flew into LA and headed down to Venice Beach, which of course, if you go to LA, you've got to check out Venice Beach. LA, of course, is another one of these cities where people say, "Oh, LA, it's a bit of a dump, and there's homeless people everywhere, and it's I'd avoid it. I wouldn't go on holiday there," kind of thing. But again, it was a place I went to as a kid on that trip all those years ago. And this was the point where we met up with our friends. So our best friends, shout out to Sam and Rachel, were over in America on their honeymoon. They got married earlier this year in July, which is something I kind of mentioned before. And of course, it's their honeymoon, so we didn't want to kind of go with them, so to speak. But they were over there, they were doing the proper Route 66 road trip, and they'd done some really, really, they hired a Mustang and basically, did whole days worth of driving, and went camping in the desert and went to like an IndyCar race and all that kind of stuff, which is really, really cool. I definitely, based on what they were saying, I would like to do the desert camping thing at some point in the future. But we met up with them in LA. We had like an Airbnb, and they stayed in a hotel, and saw them, did a nice food tour with them up and down Venice Beach, and really, really cool part of the world, Venice Beach in LA. Obviously, you've got Muscle Beach there, quite famously. You've got Gold's Gym, which we didn't visit. Like I say, it was kind of predominantly centered around this food tour that we did, but very interesting part of the world, Venice. And the story behind Venice Beach is that basically, hundreds of years ago, some Californian went to Venice in Italy and decided he wanted to build his own version in America, which doesn't usually end well, does it? But actually, it was really nice, compared to the original Venice. And just as an aside, actually, we did look up how many Venices there are in the world, and it turns out there's like 7 outside of the original Venice, and all of them are in America. It seems that seems like you stick a bunch of canals anywhere, and they'll call it Venice. But anyway, that's by the by. Really these really lovely. Kind of tidal, ocean-connected canals, really big and wide. Some really impressive, obviously very expensive houses down either side of them. Lovely place to go for a wander. There's no traffic or anything like that, and well worth checking out. I think that's a bit of a recurring theme, isn't it, of this ramble? Check this out, check that out, because it was awesome. And that's literally just a couple of minutes walk from the actual beach itself. And it was quite an interesting experience. So one thing I will mention and that I will be quite open about is that cannabis is legal in California. It's actually legal in quite a few parts of America, which we knew before we went, and it's something that I do have some history with in my misspent teenage years. And we're kind of speaking between us. We're like, well, it is legal, and it's it's also legal for tourists to buy it. Perhaps we should give it a go. It's kind of part of the culture and all that kind of stuff. And literally everywhere you go around Venice Beach, you just smell it everywhere. And I actually really like the smell of it. I think it's much nicer than cigarette smoke, but that's by the by. But anyway, very long story short, we bought some gummies from one of the dispensaries, and we had some cannabis gummies, and it was very nice. Checking out hanging out on the beach in the evening and checking out the skate park, and going for some nice dinner and stuff. We did have a bit of a run in, not personally, but there was a bit of an incident with some crackheads, I guess, on the beach. One guy. Some guy was walking his dog, and this was literally like right outside the restaurant we were sat in. Some guy was walking his dog, and then like some guy who was obviously completely off his face on something started bothering him. And the guy whipped out a taser, the dog walker, and started waving it at him and pressing the button and stuff, which was quite exciting, especially in the kind of mental state that we were in. But that was kind of the only really kind of incident of its type. But so there's a place called Mr. Charlie's, which I should mention. It's like a knockoff McDonald's, a very kind of knowing nod to being a knockoff McDonald's. It's all red and yellow and kind of similar logo and that kind of stuff. And it's a vegan take on McDonald's. And obviously quite late at night on the walk back, we decided that we're a little bit hungry, and I fancied a burger. Bought their their most basic burger on the menu, and don't go to Mr. Charlie's. It was nasty. I've had some good vegan burgers and stuff over the years, the Impossible Burgers and that kind of stuff, but no, that ain't it. If you remember it's been a very long time since I've had McDonald's, and even longer since I've had one of their sort of basic hamburgers. But a very flat, dry, tasteless, not very pleasant experience at all. I don't know if the other stuff on the menu was like that, but it really put me off. And sat at the table basically, slating this burger and tearing it apart and talking about how much I hated it. And there was some kind of, I don't know, influencer, TikToker type person on the next table who was, recording recording herself eating this burger and talking about, it's amazing. It's like, well, no, it's not. No, it's not. You're wrong. So there you go. But anyway, don't go to Mr. Charlie's. And then we decided that we would head up the next day. Next day it was time for us to leave to go to our next destination, which was kind of a more central area of LA, closer to Hollywood, which I will talk about in the next ramble. So the next day we checked out of the Airbnb. We managed to convince our friends a very fancy hotel to take our cases for the day, which was very good of them. And we went and checked out Santa Monica Pier, which was a very cool Very cool place as well. Very, very overpriced, and definitely a bit of a tourist trap. And in the kind of surrounding area of the pier, it didn't really seem to be a lot to do. Although we didn't really spend much time checking it out. Of course, something you've got to do when you're in LA and when you're in that area. Of course, very reminiscent of GTA 5, that whole area, which is kind of what GTA 5 is a bit of a send up of. And of course, the pier that they've modelled quite faithfully, and the Venice canals and that kind of stuff, which was quite interesting. We made quite a few comments about that and references to it. But there's an arcade on the pier, which of course we checked out. One of these ticket-based things where you load up a card and you can win tickets and then exchange them for massively overpriced tat. They did have some classic arcade games there, Pac-Man and Gallagher and that kind of stuff, which I did have a go on. The Pac-Man that I played on was evidently very much neglected. The CRT was on its last legs, but I thought I'd give it a bit of a send-off and have a play on that because, nobody was giving it any attention. And there's a roller coaster as well. There's some like fairground rides and stuff, and then we paid like $12 each to go on this roller coaster, which lasts all of about a minute. Thankfully, there wasn't a queue for it. And it's, but it is what it is. You got to do this stuff when you're at these places. A really cool part of the world. And at that point, we decided to head up into a more central location close to Hollywood. And I will be talking about that next time, so make sure you tune in for that. Checked out all the typical tourist stuff, the observatory up on the hill, which was really cool. We actually saw a rocket launch while we were there, which was completely unexpected and incredibly lucky timing. God only knows how that worked out. And of course, the Walk of Fame and all the typical tourist stuff. And then we went on to Las Vegas, and our casino was hacked. I don't know if you've seen that in the in the news in the past few weeks, but while we were actually there, the hotel casino that we were staying in was hacked by Russian hackers, and nothing was working properly, which was really interesting to check out, and a bit of a pain. So I'll talk all about that stuff in the next Ramble. I hope you've enjoyed my review of America so far. As you can probably tell, a really positive experience, and maybe some tips for you if you're planning a trip yourself. I appreciate this Ramble has been a bit longer than usual, which is why I decided to split it into two parts. Check out the links. I'll post some links to some of the stuff that we got up to if you want to check it out. And tune in next time for part 2 of Rees's Great America Review. Okay, bye.